Did you know the term cartoon comes from the cardboard you sketch on before you paint a painting? So like the cartone, which makes sense because cartoons aren't fine art. They're just used to represent what can become fine art. And this distinction is still around today. Classy cartoons aren't cartoons, they're animations. The modern understanding of the term cartoon comes about from Britain in the 1800s, from all those like satirical political cartoons making fun of ministers and stuff. So from the very start, cartoons are fundamentally linked with comedy. Both are crude, lowbrow, and pejorative mediums, each contained by a symbolic boundary of taste and class. Cartoons act as crude representation, whose crudeness obfuscates their symbolic potential. Here is a drawing of something, and it's not the thing, just a censored representation of it. But its crudeness, its censorship, is what allows me to say the truth. Yes! Oh my god, so true. This is literally me when I'm the peasant class in 18th century revolutionary France. I think the reason adults think cartoons are great for kids is because like cartoons can get away with showing traumatic shit to a toddler without straight up fucking traumatizing a toddler. But there's a strict social boundary around cartoons, and it's the boundary between like the child-friendly and the adult, the censored and the traumatic. Yeah, and sure, plenty of great children's content also manages to tackle adult themes, but like, you know, Adventure Time's not going to do a one-take, 20-minute rape scene. It's still got to be palatable. But this is why cartoon worlds are great. They're idealized. Cartoons aren't meant to represent anything outside of themselves. They represent, sure, but gently, implicitly, and abstracted. Yeah, this guy wants to murder this rabbit, but in a fun, goofy, slapstick way. Sure, it's a brutal and fascist enforcement agency, but you know, they're little doggies with cute little dog jobs. Sure, they're slaves working on a plantation, but it's fun, and they sing songs, and Okay, so it turns out it's real easy to make dicey ideas palatable when they're put inside fun-time, family-friendly worlds. Song of the South, really racist movie. But it's not racist in like a Birth of the Nation way. The film is set in a not plantation where black folk are just, oh so happy being not slaves. And there's no violence or bigotry, and everyone gets along just fine. Yeah, and the film contains live action, but if we consider this boundary graph I've made up here, even though the film represents real live action human people, they're still represented as if they were cartoons. Song of the South still exists inside the boundary of family friendly. So essentially the film is performing a type of revisionist history by normalizing the exploitation of black people in the 19th century, making a dicey idea idealized and palatable. So this creates a situation where representation can be made enjoyable simply by mediation, simply by representing it as a cartoon. It's no longer the uncomfortable reel of black slavery, it's a lovely, painted over, palatable sing-song time. Alright then, you mighty analyst, you. What? Are you trying to ruin my childhood? Should I be made uncomfortable by children's media? Why can't I enjoy this thing? Sure, it's racist, but it's just a cartoon. 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 You've probably heard of Ralph Bashki, either from his rotoscope Lord of the Rings film or his more dicey stuff. And we're going to be talking about the dicey stuff. Disclaimer, these films are pretty politically uncomfortable. Part of Bashki's style is just the use of really racialized caricaturing, or just caricaturing in general. But that's kind of the point. Like, it's supposed to make you uncomfortable because it's doing what cartoons aren't supposed to do. It's adult. It's representation made explicit. Bashki's worlds politicize cartoons. These images exit the palatability of family-friendly media and reference real-world adult things that cartoons just aren't supposed to talk about, like race, sex, gender, crime, drugs, just straight up Nazis. There they are. So this is taking our cartoon boundary graph and just completely turning it on itself. Bashki is depicting these cartoons in parallel with the world of real live action people. And I mean this literally. In the film Skin, felt wrong saying that. The animation often plays over live action footage. There's guys just straight up looking at the camera while this bear walks down the street. And it looks and feels so weird, but it's only because the footage is so real. It's grounding this bear man. This isn't happening in a fantasy plantation. We're in 70s New York with all the injustice, violence, and racial oppression.
This is a radical. This is a musician. This is a man. This is a woman.
This is a black man. This is a black woman. This is a gay man. This is a trans woman. This is white, masculine fragility. This is a man who don't have a head. This is a mosquito. This is a vampire and his mum. Butterfly mum? This is an Italian boy. If you don't get the joke, there's this video on YouTube called, like, The World of Ralph Bashki. I mean, I think it's good, but I also think it kind of ignores the uncomfortable, political, and, like, absurd nature of Bashki's cartoons. Because when watching Bashki's movies, it's really difficult saying something like, it's just a cartoon. Because a lot of the time, the cartoons represent something that's just a bit too hard to symbolically censor. Because at the core of it all is this aesthetic of making the grotesque real. Here are your stereotypes. Look at them in their full grotesquerie. But what happens when we depoliticize grotesque art? Well, you're just left with the grotesque. And not a cool, interesting grotesque, it's a vapid and empty, studio-driven nightmare world of sex and color and... Brad Pitt? Oh. This video is about Cool World. 9 years after his last movie, Ralph Bashki pitched a live-action/animated horror film to Paramount Studios called Cool World. The original story was going to be about a cartoon and human having sex and conceiving a hybrid, half-cartoon, half-human child who visits the real world to murder her father. Paramount bought the script and got Frank Mancuso Jr. to produce. Frank Mancuso Jr. was the son of Frank Mancuso Sr., who was the CEO of Paramount at the time. Remember those names, it'll come back later. Frank Mancuso Jr., producer, rocks up first day of shooting with a completely rewritten script. It had gone from a hard R rating to a dumbed down PG-13 studio sham of Bashki's original story. Oh, and apparently Bashki punched the guy in the face, allegedly. And I think this is why Cool World is so interesting, because it's trying to turn Bashki's grimy and grotesque animation style into like this family-friendly cartoon, and it just fails miserably. The movie is a fucking fever dream. Nothing makes any sense. Plot threads just appear and disappear, and there's always so much just random shit on screen that it's impossible to pay attention to just any of it. What I want to try and figure out is what Cool World has to say. Because at the core of all the clutter I think are a couple really interesting ideas. So I should do a plot summary here, and I will, but because this movie is so chaotic, and a bunch of people have already done like summary reviews of it, I'm gonna try and just speed run through it. You ready? Alright, let's go. We start in 1945. Brad Pitt returns from the war and is really happy to see his mum, who dies pretty much immediately. Brad gets a PTSD flashback and this little dude opens up some sort of portal, bringing Brad into the new world. The sequence is really awkward and messy. There's no real build up to the animation. It's just like hard cuts, but get used to it because the whole movie's like that. Then we go to 1992 where this guy, Jack, is in prison for murdering his wife's lover. In his dreams, he is sucked into Cool World and he sees this babe do a dance. So in the meantime, Brad Pitt has become a detective living in Cool World, enforcing the one law this universe has.
Noids do not have sex with doodles. Right? Noids do not have sex with doodles.
Don't fuck the toons. Or at least, humans can't have sex with toons because it would rip a hole in the fabric of reality, because sex is wrong, and this is a movie for kids. We also learn that this babe, Holly Wood, wants to cross over to the human world, and only one cartoon has managed to do it before. The scene is also intensely sexually codified.
When they touch something, they feel it. And when they taste something, they really taste it. And when they do it with a man, they really do it.
Next scene, Jack's gotten out of prison, and we learn that he's a cartoonist who... Oh my god. Whoa, that's the name of the movie. So does that mean that Cool World is like a timeless place? Because it established that Cool World existed before Jack wrote it.
This place exists with or without you. You believe me, right? I'm not one of your creations.
Or is it just a place separate from any material conception of time? Or what the fuck? Who is she? Oh, don't do that! Holly rescues Jack and they go on a wild car chase. And meanwhile, we learn that Jack has a cartoon GF called Lynette, but of course, they can't fuck. Oh, and a partner who's a spider? It doesn't matter. Then, in the most sexual PG-13 sex scene put to film, Holly and Jack fuck. So, now that Holly has gained the flesh, she steals Jack's pen, which, if you read into the film a little, might represent something a bit different.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Oh, so bad. Oh, man, that's gotta hurt. Oh, a pen job. Oh, yeah, pen me too. Pen me.
Frank and Holly leave to the human world and start romping around. Here, Holly tries to seduce a man through sexy song, but is hit by a wave of feeling and flickers between human and clown, ridiculed, embarrassed, shameful. Holly, unable to handle shame, decides to become a human permanently, so she goes to the Spike of Power, a MacGuffin on top of the Las Vegas casino, which acts as a portal between Cool World and Human World. In the climax of the film, Frank arrives in Human World and teams up with Jack and this lady, who I think is Frank's neighbor. It doesn't matter. Oh, and then Frank, Brad Pitt, climbs up some stairs to stop Holly and fucking dies instantly. Holly grabs the Spike of Power, and Toons escape and fuck around with the human world. Jack becomes a superhero, defeats Holly, rounds up the Toons, and returns the Spike. Okay, so worlds balance. Superhero Frank and cartoon Holly spend the rest of their existence together, and...
When they get killed by a doodle, they become a doodle themselves.
Oh, hey! Isn't that handy? So, Frank and his girlfriend can fuck. Yay, happy ending. So, I bet you're all wondering, what the fuck? What the fuck did you just show me? What was that? And what is this bootleg ass Who Framed Roger Rabbit shit? To answer that, I'm so sorry, but I had to. You see, I haven't been sleeping well. Ever since I first saw Brad Pitt vaguely staring into the space where some production assistant said that animate a cartoon, I've been getting visions, fever dreams of sexy Rule 34 hotties trying to fuck me. Faux Disney parodies crawling over my skin. This lady. Oh, fuck this lady. I need to end this nightmare. I need to understand Cool World. So we know that Cool World is like the synthesis of a deeply political animation style and the censorship of studio hacks. You've probably noticed from the clips I've shown that characters and objects will just enter and exit a frame, like repeating the same animation loop. Apparently Bashki told his animators, who were often working without a script, to, quote, do a scene that's funny, whatever you want to do. That line is so good. Because firstly, it just like shows that this was made by someone who just hated the thing they were working on. But it also shows the implicit political contradiction in this style of studio-mandated cartoon worlds, where a political aesthetic has been censored into what was supposed to be this palatable, idealistic world. But this style of animation just doesn't work without context. And because the animators were working without a script, we're just left with these manic images of abstract and chaotic movement. Laughing, screaming, destroying, chasing, fucking. These images exist without inhibition. They simply are. But paradoxically, Cool World is still a censored space. The toons aren't family-friendly Disney cartoons, but they're not Bashki's hyper-exaggerated grotesqueries either. They're somewhere in the grimy, perverse in-between, which in a way completely contradicts the studio rewrite. Cool World wants to exist as a boarded, idealized, self-contained, politics-free world. And sure, we got rid of anything that'll make it a hard R, but what we're left with is way, way worse. Cool World takes the symbolic boundary around cartoons and fucking implodes it into nothing. It's not family friendly, it's not political, it's just visual noise. So, to understand Cool World, we can't really analyze it as a Bashki film, because it's not making any explicit reference to any reality. The reality in Cool World is as cartoon as the cartoon world. But the cartoon world is not like any other cartoon. Bashki himself said it was never a Bashki picture, it was always a Paramount picture. But I don't think that's right either. Because if Paramount really had full creative control over this movie, why is there so much fucking? Every character is so horny. Like, even the fucking buildings are horny. Look at this building. Tell me that guy's not down to plow. So we're gonna have to try and analyze Cool World in a different way. And I think at the end of it all, we'll be able to finally answer the question that everyone has asked themselves at least once in their life. Why can't you fuck the tunes? Oh, fuck. Oh. Alright, this is what we've all been waiting for, the raw, uncensored theory. That's right, we're actually gonna pull some fucking meaning out of this mess. We ready? Let's go. When humans are born, they usually come out as stupid, dumb little babies who are completely dependent on their mother to survive. But more specifically, they're dependent on their mother's desire for them to not fucking die. What this is a desire for the mother's desire. And this is something that follows us around our entire lives. And yeah, like, it makes sense. Unless you're a sociopath, being desired is looked really nice. But the thing about people, and especially women people, is they tend to have their own wills and desires that may not include you, no matter how much you want them. Throwing a massive tantrum after being rejected is a classic example of being in this infantile position of disempowerment. It's the traumatic process of realizing that you are dependent on the other's desire. It's a realization that you're not a subject that can exert will, but an object to be selected or rejected. No, I'm not saying that rejection is inherently harmful, but I'm saying if you throw a tantrum after being rejected, you're being a fucking baby. The trauma of rejection, of being undesirable, is especially threatening to masculine ideals of egoism. In Cool World, we can clearly read the trauma of being undesired through Jack's affair.
Why don't you do a book on that guy you murdered? You know, that guy you found in bed with your wife.
And this is the trauma which not only spirals him into Cool World, but allows him to create a new love object. A love object that is pacifized and thus incapable of rejecting him. My wife won't fuck me, but maybe Holly would. In their discussion on the sleeping woman trope, Helen Sixus? Sixu. In their discussion on the sleeping woman, Hélène Sixu and Catherine Clement call man the second mother. In this fantasy birth, women emerge into existence only able to see the man in front of them, meaning everything she experiences and can experience is filtered through that initial attachment. And you can find this trope everywhere, usually in characters that are non-human or less than human, like fembots, your cat turning into a cute girl, cartoons coming to life. Basically beings that are free of all those icky taboos that come with, you know, women with rights and subjectivity. Basically, this flips the infant-mother dynamic. Like your mother was the origin point for your consciousness, now you can be the origin point for this cat girl's consciousness. And the best part is, she's completely dependent on your desire, just like you were completely dependent on your mother's desire. So in reference to Cool World, Jack the cartoonist births Holly twice. First as a cartoon, a being that can only exist as an object, as something to be looked at. And therefore to exist as something that can only be looked at, she is completely dependent on his look. Secondly, Jack births Holly into a human form by sleeping with her, fulfilling his somewhat repressed desire for sex, but more importantly, Holly's desire to be desired. So from this viewpoint, we can kind of see Cool World as a space structured by Jack's unconscious. We've already talked about the inhabitants of Cool World. We're just left with these manic images of abstract and chaotic movement. Laughing, screaming, destroying, chasing, fucking. These images exist without inhibition. They simply are. So what I'm talking about there are drives. Desire is different from drive. And this is a really fucking complex distinction that I can't talk about. But I'll just keep it as this is drive. See that? This is desire. Drive is like pure, raw, unconscious urge, and desire is drive put into a subject-object relation, into something that isn't just like raw animal noises. We got that? Okay, cool. So the drives expressed by the Cool World inhabitants, the drives to laugh, scream, destroy, are what we must repress into our unconscious, into our dreams, for us to function as, you know, social beings that don't shit themselves in public. And this process, this thing that tells you not to shit yourself in public, is what is called the reality principle. The reality principle is a function of the ego, which allocates drives based on a shared social reality. Basically, I want to shit myself. Is it socially acceptable for me to shit myself? No. Okay, that's fine. Let's just tuck that away and fantasize about shitting until I get to a toilet. Wow, really stretched that example. So the cartoons in Cool World don't really conform to any reality principle. If they want to build a gigantic phallic symbol, they will. Like, physics doesn't exist. If they want to harass a guy on the street or just like float through the screen, they will. They have no respect. And it's because they're not capable of subjecthood and desire, only drive. So the division between the real world and cool world starts to correspond with a few things. It's the division between the world of objects and subjects, repression and pure fulfillment, structured reality, and unstructured dream. And in the film, Cool World appears to Jack through his dreams. It is to him a kind of nightmare with all of his repressed urges floating around and freaking him out. Wait a second. If Holly is a child, and she fucks her symbolic mother, and kills the one authority figure, then... Eatable triangle alert! That's right, boys, we got one! Okay, this part's a bit dense, and I've turned down the microphone because I was screaming a lot. But, if you can't follow, that's fine. We'll get back to the cartoons in a bit. So in Oedipal triangulation, the father imposes the law of the symbolic order onto the infant's chaotic, impressionistic, partial objects by standing as a representation of the big other. Simply put, I want my mum to love me, but she loves this fucking guy. I guess I should be more like him. Oh. So if the mother is the child's first other, then the dad is the other of the other, who the child must identify with as a model on like how to be a stable, integrated subject. So the child starts out super stupid, completely dependent on this like libidinally driven desire for their mother. That's all they want. And this non-self-aware state is called autoeroticism, where you're not a subject or an object, you're just a dumb little baby touching stuff because it feels good and you like it. Then, by identifying with the father, the stand-in for the big other, the child recognizes and develops a love for their own ego as an object. Basically, they learn narcissism. They learn how to see themselves as a subject. Ooh, imagine if I was a dad. So the Oedipal story is a pretty loose symbolic narrative on how we go from like stupid babies to proper subjects. And it gets a lot of flack because, you know, fair enough, I don't want to fuck my mom. But that doesn't mean we can't use this model to analyze Cool World. We know that Holly desires Jack's desire, classic child-mother situation. But how does Brad fit in as the symbolic father? Jack doesn't desire Brad like a mother would desire their partner, but Brad still tries to channel Jack's attention away from Holly by revealing Holly's autoerotic state, by pointing out that she's just a cartoon, and humans don't have sex with cartoons.
Noids do not have sex with doodles.
And Brad is allowed to say this because in the film, he isn't a cartoon, at least excluding the last 10 minutes. He's human, not an object to be looked at, but a subject to relate to. And even though Cool World is created by Jack, Brad Pitt still exists and has existed in Cool World way before Jack birthed it.
This place exists with or without you. You believe me, right? I'm not one of your creations.
For Jack, Brad is an other who commands a kind of deeper understanding about Cool World. He's a sexy noir detective who seems to know the way things really are. He assumes an authority beyond this symbolic world. And this is reflected in how the film writes Brad's character. We start off the film with him, essentially framing him as the protagonist, as who the audience must identify with to understand what the fuck is going on. So when Brad speaks the don't fuck the tunes law, he speaks it from a place more other, more true and real than Cool World. And this is how the big other works. It speaks as if it were the word of God, as something beyond us, its laws and necessary preconditions for existence. So we can read the don't fuck the tunes law as a sort of ideology, as it is the border between what is and isn't Cool World. Humans can have sex, cartoons cannot. Because Cool World is a cartoon, its inhabitants cannot have sex with humans. And as Brad is the mouth that speaks this law, he becomes a stand-in for the boundary between Cool World and Real World. So, Holly's relationship with Brad starts to fit with the child's envious relationship with their father. Holly envies Brad as she recognizes him as belonging to the world of humans, as someone who can exert will by speaking the law which divides the two worlds. And as her only desire is to be desired by her mother, she internalizes this law, but only to rebel against it.
Now keep your legs crossed and forget about the real world. Thank you for your time.
Fuck you, Dad! So in this scene we can see Holly is expressing a kind of will, but it's not the will of a fully formed human subject, as it is still a will that can only be expressed by her infantile desire for the mother. Alright, cool, so now we've defined how Cool World works as a space, and how Holly, Jack, and Brad all relate to each other. We can begin to chart out the story, reanalyzed through this Oedipal framework. So functionally, Holly is born as a passive love object. However, we can see her character arc throughout the film as a kind of feminine maturation, where she shifts from asking the question, do they desire me, to do I desire them? Lacan theorized that drive, which we'll just use interchangeably with desire for this bit, is structured like a circuit. It starts in an erogenous zone in the body, goes out, tickles the object, then comes back into the zone. But what's use of us is what structures the circuit. What Lacan calls the three grammatical voices. The active, to see, the reflexive, to see yourself, and the passive, to make yourself seen. The passive voice is really interesting because it's the only voice where the subject relates to an other subject rather than an object or yourself. So in Cool World, we can see Holly's character arc as kind of a traveling backwards through these voices. She starts off only able to make herself seen. She starts off as only autoerotic, but after she moves into the real world, she becomes self-reflexive, that is, self-aware. She's no longer performing just for her own autoerotic narcissism, but for the first time experiencing pain and humiliation, aware of an other who she is performing for. She is starting to become a subject. And it's worth noting that once Holly starts becoming more real, her and Jack start to really hate each other.
You're a nice fellow, Jack. Don't piss me off.
Oh yeah? What are you gonna do about it, Holly? Huh?
Which makes sense, considering that Jack, consciously or unconsciously, wants to keep Holly in that position of sexual infantilization. He is her second mother, so he wants to keep her as solely an autoerotic object. Which explains why Jack looks so peeved when he gets mega cucked in the nightclub.
She's with me! No, she's with us.
Oh no, all these strangers get to look at my daughter wife. Oh! So Holly's on the path to subjecthood, but she's not quite there yet. She's still in a transitional state between human and cartoon, because there is still a separation between the cartoon world and the real world. So, in killing Brad, Holly kills the symbolic authority that enforces this separation between the two worlds. Like literally, he's trying to stop her from like tearing the fabric of reality apart, and she fucking kills him, which interestingly stops her from flickering into a clown and allows her to grab the spike of power, making Cool World and Real World start to merge. Let's talk about desire. Lacan sees desire as a lot of stuff, but most importantly, he sees it as a lack, an emptiness. Because desire isn't the thing that caused you to desire, it's the wanting of the thing. And a hole is a pretty obvious signifier for desire, because it's an emptiness that wants to be filled in. And what do we put in holes? That's right, cock. Wait, no, we're supposed to be academic. Yeah, that's better. That's better. The phallus is the signifier we use to plug the hole. That is, it's the thing we cover up our lack, our emptiness with. For example, I have a tiny microscopic dick, but I drive a big old truck to cover up my lack of penis and pretend that I have full control over my desire. What? Hole? There's no hole here. I am conscious of all of my urges And I get mega puss. The car is my phallic signifier. It's the thing I wield to pretend I can wield desire, when actually desire is a big empty hole. And the spike of power is no different. The spike phallus represents two things. Firstly, it represents what I see as like the symbolic work of cartoons. In the first section of the video, I talked about the way cartoons can turn things that are too abstract or too painful to comprehend into digestible fictional representations. What makes a cartoon palatable is that it's just a cartoon. But that statement that's implicit in the palatability of cartoons is just doing the same work of the phallus. It's covering up the fact that representations in cartoons are still the things they're representing. So by removing the spike, the boundary between the abstract representation of cartoons and the traumatic emptiness of reality is dissolved. So from this view, killing Brad and grabbing the spike are functionally the same thing, as they both symbolize the boundary between human and cartoon. I suspect that this was something from Bashki's original script, as it just fits so beautifully with his overall style. Secondly, and more broadly, being able to hold the spike represents the ability to possess desire. This is something that humans think they have, and it's something that cartoons are absolutely not allowed to have. Remember, they are only meant to be objects to be desired, not subjects capable of desiring. So Holly's grasping of the spike of power can be seen as her trying to congeal into a fully formed subject. In holding the spike, Holly finally takes an active relation to desire and can truly engage in the process of objectification, turning Jack into a goofy, ubermensch superhero guy. Only then can she see Jack, not as a potential subject to desire her or not, but as an object for her to desire, or as it turns out, not desire. So, Holly has completely gone from do they desire me to do I desire them, shifting from object to subject. But we know that Holly doesn't fully become real. When she grabs the spike of power, she turns back into a cartoon. But she's broken and killed the subjectifying boundary that determines what is and isn't a subject. She holds the spike, but as her desire cannot be mediated through the proper subjectifying force, it no longer becomes a subject's desire. It is de-subjectified, raw, schizophrenic, and unrestrained. Turns out, if you want to be a subject, you can't kill your dad. So the movie ends with Holly right back where she started. She doesn't manage to subjectify herself, but she manages to de-subjectify everyone else. Jack and Brad become cartoons, and cartoons still can't fuck humans. The father is dead, but his law is still alive. If we're reading Cool World as Holly's story, which was probably closer to Bashki's original script, this ending is really sad. Holly starts out as the literal depiction of a male fantasy. She is only able to exist in the passive voice, that is, only through the eyes of another. Everyone in Cool World tells her that this is something beyond her comprehension, that becoming a human subject is not something to be messed with, but yet she still wants to be real. In Genesis, woman is described as being created for man, while man is being created for God. Eve is separated from creation, mediated through the eyes of another subject. So what does she do? She bites down on that apple. But I mean, who could blame her? So earlier I asked the question, why can't humans fuck cartoons? And the answer is, what are you talking about? They can. They do it in the fucking movie. The law is just an abstract, symbolic boundary set up by this lawman who ends up fucking a cartoon in the end. Oh, but I guess it's okay because you waited until cartoon marriage. Oh, babe, I'd love to fuck you, but I'm just so scared that if I do, you'll gain sentience and try to murder me. Alright, Brad. Like, the whole movie we're supposed to identify with this guy. We start out with him coming back from the war, and we end with him having sex, but he's like the lamest character. He has one job, which he fucking fails at. And when it gets out of control and he tries to solve it, he fucking dies. Oh, but the studio says we need a happy ending. That's fine. If you die in the real world, you become a cartoon. It's fine. Don't worry about it. I see your prints all over this, Frank Mancuso Jr. Yeah, that's right. Oh, didn't think I'd bring it back, but I did. Aren't authority figures awesome? When I think Ralph Bashki, I think love of the police.
Come on out! It's the police!
Oh, no, don't identify with the woman. Ew, she's the bad guy. Identify with your dad. If any woman tries to fuck you, don't let her. You know what? I'd like you guys to meet my fiancée. Yeah, I drew her yesterday, but she is 18 plus. Her name is Mimi and she's got double E titties and yes, we are waiting until marriage. Thank you for asking. Fucking bullshit movie says I can't fuck cartoons. I mean fucking cartoons since like 2010. Video over. So hey, if you made it this far, holy shit, thank you for watching this entire video. Sorry if it didn't make a lot of sense, the movie doesn't really make a lot of sense, but it was fun to try and throw theory at it until something happened. As professional as I may sound, I actually don't know that much psychoanalysis, but I mean, like, I love how fluid it is. Like, you can apply it to a movie as nonsensical as Cool World, and at a point, it just kind of starts to make sense. Oh, and how good is this song? It's fucking David Bowie and Brian Eno. They got Bowie and Eno to do the Cool World soundtrack. Yeah, wild, right? Oh, also got to mention, I did get a lot of help with this one from my pal Georgia, who actually knows how to read. Crazy, right? I showed her this movie a while ago and she wrote this like amazing essay that we adapted into this thing. So even though my face is painted all over the video, it is as much her work as it is mine. The link to her paper should be in the description. And I mean, there's still a lot that we didn't go into, like, is Jack's pen also a phallus? And why can Jack wield the spike of power at the end if cartoons aren't supposed to be able to do that? I don't know. Hey, why don't you guys let me know? See, that was a little call to action to my 20 viewers. But I love you all. Thank you for watching, and if you like this, subscribe, comment, all that. Cool. Yeah, I bestow upon you a thanking kiss. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Thank you for watching, and good night. Good night. Good night. Bye-bye.